Deborah Siegel with us on this free webinar, Thought Leadership for Writers, where she is going to just be introducing you to some amazing concepts and really smart thinking about thought leadership and platform building. So I'd like to start with a formal introduction of who you're going to be hearing from tonight. Deborah Siegel is the author of Sisterhood Interrupted, From Radical Women to Girls Gone Wild, co-editor of the literary anthology Only Child, and creator of Girl with Pen, a group blog. She's the co-founder of SheWrites.com, which makes us sisters. Her writing on women, contemporary families, sex, popular culture, and the unfinished business of feminism across generations has appeared in venues including CNN.com, The Washington Post, The Guardian, The Forward, and many more. She lectures and keynotes on campuses nationwide and has been featured on TV and radio, including The Today Show, Good Morning America Radio, The Wendy Williams Experience, and public radio. Deborah earned her PhD in English and American Literature from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and is currently a visiting scholar in gender studies at Northwestern, a senior facilitator with the Op-Ed Project, and a guest instructor at Story Studio Chicago. In addition to teaching and writing, Deborah coaches thought leaders seeking to unlock their thoughts on the page and in the world and bring their bring their expertise public in fresh and newfangled ways. So I am just so pleased to welcome you, Deborah. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Brooke. And thank you, She Writes.
Yeah, thanks. And we're looking forward to everything that you have to impart upon the readers tonight. And I do want to let people know that Debbie, at the end of the call tonight, also has a really incredible offer in a way that you can continue to work with her and be involved in expanding your thought leadership beyond tonight. So with that, we welcome you to take it away.
Thanks so much, and thanks for hosting. So, thought leadership for writers. Who am I? As Brooke said, I'm Deborah Siegel, and I'm an author and a speaker and a consultant. The tagline I've come to think of for myself is bringing knowledge to life. As Brooke mentioned, I'm the author of 2 traditionally published books. I'm currently working on my 3rd, which is a graphic memoir about the gendering of childhood in the earliest years of life. I'm the mother of boy-girl twins and a gender scholar. I blog. Girl with Pen is a blog that bridges feminist research and popular reality. The Pink and Blue Diaries is a blog connected to my current platform where I muse on all things gender, parenthood, writing, and life. And I give talks, I write essays and op-eds, and I help others, including many writers, get focused and gain skills and learn to lead publicly with their ideas. This is an image my husband drew, he's actually my partner in the graphic memoir. And sometimes I look at this image and I see my clients or my friends who are writers. And sometimes I look at this image and I see myself because I'm in the trenches really too. So you're probably thinking at this point, thought leadership for writers. What does that even mean? Is thought leadership just another thing that writers now need to worry about on top of all the other things we already worry about, like marketing and promoting and selling and, oh, right, yeah, writing a really good book? I want to start off tonight by allaying your fears. I'm really not here to add to our already full load. I'm here to help us rethink it because thought leadership, in my mind, though it's a lofty term, is simply a more expansive and more effective way to think about platform. So platform, another lofty word, right? What does it mean? The dictionary definition of platform is a stage for performers or speakers, a flat-raised structure, a particular policy of a party seeking election, and my favorite part of the definition, an opportunity for doing something. Now, editors and folks like Brooke will often define platform as qualifiable proof that you're the person to write this book and quantifiable proof that you have the ability to promote it, right? And in this digital age, promotion includes, of course, online promotion. It means having a social media presence, having followers, having friends. So what's the relationship then between these two concepts, platform and thought leadership? I think of platform as what you have. It's kind of like your online footprint, your social media output, your website, your blog, your subscribers, your followers, your friends, and your book. And thought leadership is what you do with what you have. It's kind of a fancy way to say more simply the effect you have on others, the way that you lead with your ideas. It's also a term, I think, that describes bringing your whole self to the table. It's a way, really, I think of it as a way to connect story, self, and idea all in the service of your book. Or you could even say it's a way to connect story, idea, and book all in the service of you being your best and brightest possible public self. Now, for many of us, myself included, book and self are often intimately entwined, right? But we don't always mind this connection as authors in public in the ways that I think we could. And that's what I really want to talk about here. So thought leadership, though, I acknowledge, is a fuzzy concept to many. And I want to take just one more moment to clarify where did it come from, how am I using it, why am I using it here. Some trace the term's origins back to a 1964 reference in a business journal called McKinsey Quarterly. Others trace it back to 1994 when Joel Kurzman, who was the editor-in-chief of a magazine called Strategy and Business, wrote, "Thought leadership is about furthering a discussion that leads to action." It's definitely a term that springs from the business realm, right? And it's basically a marketing buzzword, and it's defined differently depending on which marketer or which PR professional you ask. My colleague Tracy Cicilli of Social Strand Media recently identified 21 different definitions for thought leadership, and among my favorite are: thought leadership is the ability to aggregate followers around ideas to educate, influence, and inspire. And this idea that a thought leader is a trusted source who moves people with innovative ideas. So I recently heard leadership pretty elegantly defined as intentional influence. And I think that maybe we could say thought leadership for writers then is the way you intentionally bring your influence to life beyond the page. And in this day of the social author, nonfiction writers and fiction writers alike, I think, can really see ourselves as disseminators of spreadable messages and sticky ideas, and as thinkers of thoughts that really inspire, move, or change. So putting it all together now, one last slide of definition here. I think a writer who is a thought leader is a trusted source with innovative ideas who educates, influences, or inspires her audience and furthers discussions that lead her audience to action, or even, I might add, to change. So one key action, of course, we all know, is the buying of her book, right? But the key thing here is that she doesn't stop or even start there. So, okay, great. What does all this look like in practice, right? And how do writers who have influence off the page actually get there? I want to turn next to some examples of authors who have had influence beyond or off the page. And the first is Susan Cain. Susan is the best-selling author of Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. Her spreadable message is basically that introverts are undervalued in our culture. When introverts are undervalued, she argues, we all lose. And her idea has been very sticky, in part because it can be applied in all these different realms: parenting, education, the workplace. It also speaks very personally to folks, people who are themselves introverts in an extroverted world, or people who know and love introverts, which, let's face it, kind of speaks to all of us in some way. Susan gave a TED Talk that a number of you have probably seen. It was viewed by over 5 million people. It's one of the most popular TED Talks of all time, I believe. And her expertise, her being out there, her book, all of this allows her to lead what she has termed a quiet revolution. She's spread a manifesto. This is posted on her website, 16 Things I Believe. She curates a forum where people discuss the issues involved in various realms, parenting, work, education, how introversion comes up. She teaches an online course called Public Speaking for Introverts, which is something she herself has clearly mastered, and so much more. If you study her website, and actually this is something I encourage people to do, to find models and really, study what others do, you'll see that she's posted a quiz, bonus content, a resource list, reading group questions, and a teacher's guide. And I have to say it's been very inspiring to watch her thought leadership unfold, particularly because she considers herself an introvert, right? So she's the first one to address the ironies here, and that only feeds her content and makes it so rich. But the takeaway for us, I think, is really a lesson in being bold. What Susan has done, what I think writers who are, thought leaders really do is she's followed her content to the max and, kind of see where it leads. Let your thoughts lead you. Go all in. That's definitely something Susan has done. And the second author I want to call up tonight is Christina Baker-Klein, who is well-versed in the world of all things she writes. Some of you may know her from the site. I wanted to draw on her, to use her as an example of a fiction writer. She's also a nonfiction writer, but her latest book is a novel. And I wanted to pick a fiction writer because more often we think of thought leadership as applying to nonfiction alone, right? But I don't think it needs to. So Christina wrote a book recently called Orphan Train, and Christina is interested in a lot of different themes as a writer, but one of the themes that she's very fascinated by is the legacy of trauma and the way that events beyond our control can shape and define our lives. So her latest novel takes place during this overlooked period in U.S. history when so-called orphan trains were transporting more than, I think it was 200,000 orphaned, homeless, abandoned children, many of them first-generation immigrants, from the coast to the Midwest in this country for adoption, which really often meant indentured servitude. So Christina's main character in this novel is one of those orphans in her old age. And in researching this novel, Christina became an expert in this little-known but historically significant moment in our country's past. And she's since gone on to position herself to do a kind of public library tour where she talks about this moment in history. She's represented by a big speakers bureau. She speaks on issues of craft and other themes that she's written on, but she also speaks about orphan trains. And I find that very inspiring. She's somebody who kind of follows her content, lets her content lead her thinking. And what Christina has also done, however, is think in public about the process of publishing and what it was like to publish this book at a moment when publishing industry has changed. And she published this book straight to softcover instead of hardcover, as she had done with her previous novels. And she wrote, she is an op-ed project alum. I teach at the op-ed project, and she wrote an op-ed for the San Francisco Chronicle on what it was like for her to publish this book in this different way. She had thoughts about it that she thought would be of interest to others, other writers, but others who are just interested in the world of publishing and how it's changed. So Christina has, again, kind of taken her influence as a writer and as somebody who's publishing off the page. Now, I want to let you in on a little secret. Susan and Christina did not start out knowing everything about where their ideas or the publishing process would take them. I doubt that Susan knew that she would end up giving one of the most popular TED Talks, and I doubt that Christina knew that she would end up publishing an op-ed in a San Francisco paper. But I think they are both really interesting examples of what Bill Gates, a thought leader of our time, always says about find a new stage to play on. Where's the place you want to engage based on who you are? Never feel finished. Always evolve. And I think that for writers to be thought leaders, we need to think about developing wider platforms for ourselves. We need to think about accruing followers beyond our most obvious readers, by publishing perhaps in venues we haven't before or in modes that we haven't thought of before, and embracing forms of communication that may be new to us. And basically, I think we need to think about being courageous and bold. We need to go beyond our comfort zones, take a chance, stretch ourselves, be big. And that's what both Christina and Susan have done. And in a sense, it's what I've been trying to do as well. And I want to share a bit more of my story with you, not so much to hold myself up as an example, but to give you myself as an example of someone who's right now in the process of creating a platform for my next book. I want to just take a moment here and pull the curtain back to show you what it is I'm doing or trying to do in the kind of thought leadership zone. And also I want to fess up a bit and demystify it some. So book projects evolve like we humans do. And this next book project, The Gender Years, for me, started out thinking it wanted to be another work of exhaustively researched nonfiction, like my first book was, Sisterhood Interrupted. And then I realized once I gave birth to my twins what motherhood was like. And I had to pull it back a little bit. And I wrote, I wanted to still be in this project, so I wrote a short personal and historical essay for an anthology. And I was thinking baby steps here, baby steps. Ultimately, the pulling back and giving myself and the project some room and time and space to breathe turned out not to be a pulling back at all in the end, but rather kind of a process of letting this book find its true form. For a while, I thought that form might be straight memoir. And then one day, my husband, a graphic designer, drew a picture of our twins, and I had one of those eureka moments, and I thought, aha, graphic memoir. So now I hadn't the first clue how to write a graphic memoir, and I couldn't draw to save my life. But for my subject matter, in which visuals really tell half the story, the gendering of childhood in the earliest years, so much visual richness, it seemed the perfect form. So I set about educating myself. I was incredibly inspired by this conference I went to called Narrative Journalism Goes Digital, which focused on multimedia and all the ways that writers can combine images and words. And somehow along the way, I became convinced that I could learn to do something new, that I could experiment here. Now, She Writes, I have to say, also has very much inspired me as the idea of thinking out loud about our books from gestation to publication is part of both Kami's and my DNA and why we started She Writes to begin with. So I started to talk out loud to everyone who would listen about this project that I had brewing, and I started talking about it as a multimedia experiment in thinking out loud and in community about the gendering of childhood in the earliest years. So early on in my thinking about it, I had launched a Tumblr blog, the Pink and Blue Diaries, when my twins were about a year old and I was starting to regain consciousness. It was a micro blog, I should say, where I just kind of push out links and images. And then in winter of 2013, I applied to give the TEDx talk, with the goal being there to figure out a way to incorporate visuals, because TED Talks are peppered with slides. And what I learned in the short training I had for that talk was also not just how to think visually and multimedia, but how to come up with a sticky catchphrase for my idea. The talk needed a tagline, so I had to come up with one. And then I basically built the talk out from there. The tagline, if anybody is curious, was, "We can learn from young children to embrace paradox and get out of our gender binary zones." And that became the larger subject of the talk, and it's also in some ways becoming the subject of the book. So this TEDx experience for me was great training for condensing my thoughts to spreadable messages and going back and forth, working content from there. When I did the talk, which was ultimately called Born That Way, ? I also launched a Pinterest board, which is another verbal visual mode, where I now continue to invite fellow pinners to post photos of young children upholding or breaking gender norms. That Pinterest board is called Tots in Genderland. And I've also been busy experimenting at a multimedia storytelling site called Cowbird. There's more, but basically each step of this process of thinking kind of away from my general mode has been new for me. And if you look at my TEDx talk, and this is where I'm going to tell you the little secret, I look calm, or relatively calm, or people tell me I do. But a few months before, when I was having a writer's block and a thinker's block, I honestly thought I was going to have to pull out. I was that nervous. Each step, I admit, has been scary as hell in some way, but also tremendously exciting. I came to realize that even though, there's been a lot written on gender, there was a way that I could tell it new and build a platform and put some thought leadership around this new form out there. And that was the newness here is through the innovating in a different form. So I share my story with you because I think there are a few takeaways here. One is that writers and books are always in evolution. Second is that when it comes to putting our ideas out there on a bigger stage, to invoke our friend Eleanor Roosevelt, we must do the thing we think we cannot do. And three, as writers, no matter what our form, fiction, nonfiction, graphic memoir, whatever it is, it's important, I think, to engage and be engaged with the zeitgeist. If there's something going on around your topic that piques your interest, even if it doesn't seem directly related yet to your book, I say go for it. Explore, get off the page. That's what I did or what I'm trying to do. And it's now all feeding back, I'm finding, into the book. Along the way, I've found it's not just my medium that's expanded, my thinking has too. And I've found new audiences for what I want to do. So I want to now turn to you and think about, together with you, how the principles of thought leadership can help you think about your book, your platform, and your influence beyond the page. And I invite you here to really dig deep and think about what scares you about thinking big, what's holding you back. And I want to emphasize again that in having these fears, if you have them, you're obviously not alone. I have them too. Just the other week, for instance, I was thinking, I'm going to throw a webinar. Will anyone come? And you did. Thank you. There's going to be some time for questions and answers at the end, and I invite you to raise any issues around fears as well as nuts and bolts there. But I want to go back to this, for the moment, to this question of telling and selling the story of your expertise and how thought leadership and platform connect, right? So editors and agents will tell you that in order to sell a book, you also need to sell you. And there are three questions that you are generally expected to answer. One is, why are you the person who should write this book? Two is, what's your platform? What have you got? And three is, what can you contribute toward making this book a success? And now I have chosen two very brave she writers to be the subject of a brief live critique as we go through these questions with them. And I want to thank Candace Chappell and Sarah Cannell for their bravery and for sharing their stories and their book ideas with us. So before we go to them, I want to just call up our definition again. Remember, a writer who is a thought leader is a trusted source with innovative ideas who educates, influences, or inspires her audience and furthers discussions that lead her audience to action. So revisiting these three questions now that editors and agents want to know, but with an eye towards answering them as thought leaders or as thought leaders in the making, they now sound like this. Why are you the person who should write this book? Persuade us beyond a doubt that you're the trusted source. You're the leader of the thinking around this topic. Again, I teach for the Op-Ed Project, and I strongly encourage anyone who hasn't taken their core seminar to do so, especially if you have trouble answering this question. Second question, what's your platform? So remember, a thought leader is going to be building a platform around innovative ideas that educate, influence, inspire. And the third question, what can you contribute? show us how you're already contributing. You're already educating, influencing, and inspiring your audience to act. I'm going to take you through 2 examples here now. Candace first. So Candace's novel, called 12 Letters, follows a young woman on a journey of losing her first family and learning to build one of her own. One more note about the book. After losing her mother, the protagonist, whose name is Lainey, grieves and decides to send out 12 letters to those who knew her mother long ago. And as the rest of her mother's story unfolds, Lainey starts to define herself differently and opens to experiences that she would have sidestepped before. So Candace answered the question, why are you the person to write this book, in the words that are currently on your screen. And I want to say that personal experience and positioning as it feeds your fictional narrative is great and important. But I also want to know from Candace, what do you know about the power of letters? I want to hear a little bit more about that. I want you to persuade me that you're the one to tell this story in this particular way. It's a novel about loss and rebuilding, and I love how Candace has connected women's, the loss of the story to women's losses overall. But I also want to know, what is it about women's letter writing that Candace knows about deeply that maybe others don't? In answer to the question, what's your platform? She has this is fantastic information on Candace's footprint and her kind of activity output. I think this is the beginnings of a really fantastic platform. And depending on what publishing route she's interested in taking as a next step, she might want to focus on publishing at a venue with a national reach too. And I can't tell if this is going to be an epistolary novel, which means a novel made up of letters. And again, I'm just riffing here. Maybe, Candace, maybe you could think about building out a platform around letter writing. Start small. Have you written any posts at your blog, for instance, in the form of letters? And what's been the response? If not, try it. Send it out there as a test balloon. Maybe you could ask your blog readers to send you a post about the most important letter that they ever received, or the most poignant one, and you could post their posts one day each for a month. Maybe you decide you want to write an op-ed on the lost art of letter writing and start, kind of building interest from there. These are just some initial ideas to help get you thinking about carrying an idea contained in your book out into the broader world in an expansive way, and in a way that will help you build audience even as you're working on the writing. Let's go to Sarah now. Sarah Cannell is, and again, this is another fiction example, and I wanted to take some fiction examples, both because my work and Susan's are nonfiction, and again, I want to kind of show how you can play with the idea of ideas and thought leadership through fiction as well. So Sarah's first book, Bringing in Finn, is a memoir about her infertility journey. It's out now, and how her mother came to be the surrogate for her son. She's working next on her first novel. And just a note about the plot of that novel, a modern-day holistic therapist, healer, discovers that she's descended from a line of French witches, a secret society of women, a sister society to the Templar Knights, whose legacy, as she uncovers it, will change her life and perhaps the life of women at large. So Sarah answered the question, why are you the person who should write this book? And I want to jump actually right to her platform question. What's your platform? Sarah's got the metrics down. And what I want to know next is, how, Sarah, are you going to tap into our culture's current fascination with witches? Lifetime has a new show airing next month. What do you, as someone now researching this history, have to say about the way witches are portrayed, or about the show's eminent popularity? Can you be educating your future audience as you yourself are learning about the topic? I'm kind of encouraging you to be out in front of your topic, owning it as you go. Another idea, Halloween is coming up. What might you take as, what might you take Halloween as an opportunity maybe to unveil? Using your current channels even. Maybe you propose a HuffPo live conversation on witches, historical and fictionalized, or historical and real. start a Twitter account maybe at Witchy Women. Again, I'm just riffing, but, thinking of ways. Maybe you share your historical research at your blog, or maybe you write a guest post for me at Girl with Pen and tell us what you're learning about secret societies of women. Was there really a real-life sisterhood counterpart to the Knights Templar? These are all just some ideas of ways that you can put your thought out there in front of your book as you're working on it. So to recap for a minute, thinking about these questions, why me, why, what are my thoughts around my topic, in a more expansive way will set your platform apart, and it will also make it become alive well before you've published your book. And it'll probably, as is the case with me, this kind of activity will also inform your book and your thinking that goes into it. Some additional questions to think of when you sit down to write your why me. Ask yourself, how does your book idea relate to previous work, previous professional background, previous personal experience for which you might already be known? Or alternatively, what are you doing now to credibly become known as a thought leader or an expert around your book's core idea? Another question, what have you already been doing to create and engage your audience, and what particular qualities do you bring to the project as an author? How do you already educate, inspire? Tell us, show us, be out there doing it in front of your book.
Yes, everyone, please find Deborah online. I mean, one thing I will say to all of you is that you want to start to follow people who are doing what you want to do. So check out Deborah's Twitter, check out her Facebook, look and see how does one build a platform online. What are people doing? And Deborah has all these things, Pinterest, Tumblr, her blog, and she spent a lot of time doing this. It's not an expectation that your stuff is going to look like this within a month. That's not how it happens. Like Deborah said, it's a marathon. How long have you been working to build your platform?
When I look at this list, I think, Girl with Pen started in 2007 when my first book came out, and then I turned it into a group blog once I had kids. The Tumblr blog was like 2010. It's kind of built over time. The Pinterest thing was just this past year. But I think what I also do is I throw a lot of things out there and see what sticks. So if you go to some of these, you'll see like some have more followers than others, and they're not all equally populated. But I use them all as kind of test drives for what I'm doing in my life and my thinking and my work. So I think of these different online forums as places to think out loud. And She Writes should be on there too. I think that's an excellent place to think out loud and share, and and share wisdom with each other. So I throw it out there to see what sticks.
Exactly. So yeah, emulate her stuff, emulate other people's stuff. Don't reinvent the wheel. That's what I'm always telling people. Go research and look and see who in your space is doing what you want to do, and then recycle. Your content, your stuff, but basically their templated stuff. They've already figured it out. You don't have to start from scratch. So that's super important to know. And we're at the end of the time for tonight.